All right, so very excited to introduce our next guest. As a singer for a band called Stereolab, she was essentially the voice of a young generation of young independent music fans, and a band that offered a really incredible pre-internet window into so many amazing musical worlds. Stereolab were a band that went on to be sampled by some of the world's greatest beatmakers, Madlib, MF Doom, Jay Dilla, absolutely huge fan. And although sadly on an indefinite hiatus since about 7 years ago, still is releasing incredible albums through her solo career. It's an honor to have her here at the Rebel Music Academy. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Lætitia Sadier. How are you, Lætitia?
I'm good, thank you.
Nice. Okay, so it must be noted that today's journey to get here to the Academy included a train from the UK.
Yes, among other means of transportation.
So once upon a time, France was your home, and not quite Paris. Whereabouts were you born?
I was born a stone's throw away from Paris, in Vincennes, where they have the horse tracks and the zoo and the castle and things like that. And so I guess I always knew my place. I'm a suburban.
So real Parisian to be, it's not Paris.
Yeah, I think I always felt there was a lot of that, the Parisians, like Intramuros, had a mentality that was, it's very sweeping generalizations, but they do hold some truth. It was quite bourgeois and bitchy and, that kind of thing. And also, like, if you dared stick your neck out as an artist, you were, like, taken out and shot immediately. So it was, I felt Paris, Intramuros was very castrating. And I didn't have a place here, alas. Though I love this city and I have many friends here.
Well, look, I tell you what, we'll find out more about this part of the journey very soon. But I thought it's a great idea to kick off with a track. This is something taken off an album called Dots and Loops, which was released I think in 1997. A track called "The Flower Called Nowhere." Here you go, Stereolab, The Flower Called Nowhere, from an album called Dots and Loops. Listen to that right now. What does that take you back to when you hear that particular track?
Oh my God, a whole world. I'm transported. Well, it's nice to hear that track. Thank you for playing it. I like it. And it takes me back to a time in Köln, in Cologne, where we recorded with our friends Jan and Andy from Mouse on Mars. And how fun it was recording with those guys in that big studio that was once like a cognac factory or something, with a very, very, very high ceiling. And of course, hearing Mary is, quite emotional. And and this record, they were not all fun. But this one was really quite delightful.
One thing that we were talking about just before this started, which I found very, very interesting, is we've got to say thanks because you delved into the archives in preparation for this talk today and pulled out a whole lot of records from the label, a whole lot of rarities from Stereolab, and we were listening to this stuff before, and you were saying that you very rarely, if ever, revisit and go back and listen to the recorded material from Stereolab. Obviously, when you're on stage, you're reperforming it. But in terms of going back and listening to the music that was recorded, you don't do this so often. Why is that?
Well, Tim and I were a couple for 14 years, and I basically learned. He was my musical formation, and that was my music school. As a Tim Gain music school. And he fantastic person and everything, and fantastic musician and composer. But I think there were some bad habits in there. And one of them was that you make a record and then you put it somewhere on a shelf and you never listen to it. you're just constantly moving forward, making the next one. Okay, that one's done, next one. And there was never, like, our records were written and recorded very quickly. There was, I mean, of course, all the love and care and attention went into it, but we didn't ponder over these for years, like, say, Broadcast would, or My Bloody Valentine, you know. So it was always, there was no preciousness around making records. They're just like churning them. We're just churning them. And like literally on a conveyor belt. I know it might sound shocking to some of you, perhaps, you know, who might have, I don't know, fantasies of, but like we would write 35 tracks, sometimes more, and in the studio it's like, okay, do all the drums, and then next do all the 35 drums, 35 bass, 35 keyboards, 35 guitar, 35, you know, like churning them literally, you know, in what was what I was decrying perhaps in my lyrics, you know, which is like this kind of automation of production, you know. So yeah, it was very automatic, but somehow that's how we did it, you know. And it wasn't a democracy either. It was.
We'll find out a bit more about that later on, because it's definitely something I want to talk to you about. But now that you've got distance from, you know, there's distance from Stereolab now. It's been, what, 7 years since the indefinite hiatus. Are you trying to find some time to revisit that music now?
Well, I haven't Stereolab's music particularly, like, I'm not going to be at home and sitting in my kitchen and playing a Stereolab record. I won't do that. But sometimes I'm in a car with someone and they're playing a Stereolab record. I'm like, yeah, we're a good band, huh? So, yeah, that's how it's, so, yeah, and even with my own material, I've made 6 albums, 3 as Monade and 3 under my own name. And it's like, I don't know why it is, if it's an insecurity or something, like the fear of, oh, it might be shit or something. I don't know. I haven't analyzed it, but yeah. But I do think, I'm 47 years old now, and so maybe coming to the autumn of my life, you know, and it is a time to reflect and really, I'm sure it would do me a lot of good to sit down and listen to everything and have a lot of pleasure in doing so, you know. So I'm sorry, there's talks of re-releasing the Stereolab vinyl albums that we did with Elektra Records. I think there's 7 albums, and for contractual reasons it's pretty messy and complicated at the moment, but we're looking into remastering and repackaging all these albums which aren't available anymore, and so we're kind of waiting for that thing to be released through the label, and well, that they let go of our material basically, you know. And that was going to be my moment of like sitting down, listening, remastering, you know. But yeah, it's taking a while. Yeah.
One thing about that track in particular, there's been a lot of very notable fans of your music who, in their own worlds, are giants, and in particular, a whole lot of hip hop artists, the ones that you know dig deep into a variety of different musics. For a lot of them, they all sing the praises of Stereolab, and in particular, Pharrell has spoken in many interviews about how that song in particular is one of his favorites. And in certain interviews, I think he goes into a bit too much detail of why he enjoys that song in particular. But does it never cease to amaze you where the music that you've created has ended up and where your voice has found itself? You know, you create music, you let it go, and then 15 years later or 9 years later, it comes back to you in strange and wonderful ways.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I guess, we're all possibly musicians here, and you know, or artists, and that's one thing that's certain, is that you don't own it. It's not something you possess. It's not because you create a piece that it's yours. That's, I think it's a bit naive to think that, because it definitely escapes you. You're just kind of responsible for putting it on Earth somehow, and then beyond that, it's just going to make its way. And I think one has very little control over that, and and that's a good thing too. I mean, when it comes to Stereolab, I think it's just music for the music lovers, and yes, music lovers are everywhere. There's not maybe a lot of them on this planet, but they will be found in all genres of music, I believe. So, and I think there was always a kind of universal quality to our music that and like kids like Stereolab somehow, and like Bob Marley or something, like everybody likes jamming, So I think there's a bit of that, in our music, and it does translate.
I think in order to talk about Stereolab, we need to go back a few steps. We need to talk about a band called McCarthy, but we even need to go a bit early and find out about these early days of Lætitia Sadier, growing up in the suburbs of Paris. When was the first moment you really fell in love with music and growing up in Paris?
Actually, if I may say, it was in my mother's womb. Because, and I heard this over and over again, that when she went to the opera, I would go bananas, probably going, turn it off. But apparently I reacted to music even then. And I remember, as a small child, music was like magical. It was, the world would stop whenever I'd hear a song on the radio that I liked. So it was like,
what were these songs that were making you stop?
Well, there were two in particular that I vividly remember. One was Heart of Glass by Blondie. That was, I had to stop whatever I was doing and just listen and soak it up, And the other one was Don't Say It by Wings. I love that song. And also, back in the sort of late 70s, Jean-Michel Jarre made this record called Oxygène. And I remember really digging that also. That really, I think I loved melodies in particular. So, yeah.
I've read in a couple of places for you as you became angsty or not so angsty teenager, whichever, but some form of a teenager, music was very much a refuge for you. Tell us about Lætitia in her teenage years and the role that music played in your life.
Indeed, I was very angsty teenager, and my life was a misery. And music was my only source of joy, apart from maybe one cat that we had in the house. So, I remember, so when I was 11, we lived in America with my family for a while. My dad worked for IBM, so the whole family got exported to Poughkeepsie, upstate New York. And I remember my first dollars I went to the record shop and had to buy and I did not know what I was buying. I had no idea, because in them days you didn't have the internet where you go and listen to something. Okay, I'm going to buy that. So I just took any record and I bought it, and it was Billy Joel, which I didn't particularly like, but I had to buy a record, So I guess this obsession with music and records was kind of early onset. And in 1981, in France, the FM wavelength was opened up to anyone who wanted to start a radio station. So imagine, the FM wavelength to, like, you and I, we're going to start a radio and we're going to play our records, So you had a fantastic variety of radio stations. And it's the only time in my life where I got to hear so much good music on the radio. It was fantastic. And so I remember a radio called Bebop, for instance, and they played only great stuff from out of this world. And so first thing I did coming home from school was get to my radio and listen.
When would you say was the first moment that you really connected with music lyrically, like where all of a sudden, you know, these lyrics really were impacting you and influencing you?
Oh, well, if I dare say, I think the Smiths, you know, I know I'm not the only one, but yes, they were big. That's where lyrics actually started to mean something.
What was it in particular about Morrissey's lyrics, and what was he saying in particular, be it politically, socially, that resonated with you?
Well, firstly, it was like, wow, there's someone who's more miserable than me. So that felt good. That was like kind of cathartic in itself. And yes, he was, you know, he talked about sexuality, which of course is of concern to every human being, but never really expressed, you know, in honest ways. So, and of course, socially, well, he was a guy. He was a lad from the estate, I think, from the. So. There was a not that I lived on the estate, but you know, as a suburban and someone not socially considered as particularly anything good, you know, then there was also a resonance there, which I think with most people, that's the thing, is that most people are suburbans, or, you know, like not from the heart of Paris, you know, or from the Queen's family, or, you know, whatever. So yeah, he created some resonance and managed to connect with people in a fantastic way. So and also very eloquently, and I learned so many English words thanks to him, you know. And I read Oscar Wilde, you know, and I became vegetarian and all that.
So at this point, you know, young Lætitia from the suburbs, listening to the Smiths, loving the lyrics of Morrissey. Still quite angsty, wanting to start a band yourself. You wanted to start a band, but it was difficult to start a band in Paris in those times, right?
Yeah, it was. I think it would have been a miracle. Okay, I believe in miracles, but I did try, and repeatedly, and I just found people with big ankles, but no real creative nerve, and that was really frustrating. So, yeah, in the end, it was clear that I needed to leave this environment and export myself.
In terms of making that journey and finally leaving that, a certain, as the history books will tell, a certain performance from a UK band happened, a band called McCarthy. What can you tell us about McCarthy? We're going to listen to a track right now, but you were a big fan of this band. Was this... did you have posters on the wall? What was your relationship to McCarthy before this one fateful night?
I discovered McCarthy on one of those radio stations. They were called RTH 99 Rock. Rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? And and I think what called me was the melodies in McCarthy and the beauty of the music. And there was a certain radicality also in the lyrics, which I did not necessarily capture all of it, because a lot of it was ironic. It was very extreme left wing, but they did have song titles like "Anti-American Cretin." So it was like, well, you know, do they mean it? Don't they? So it's very British, basically, whereby you say the contrary to what you think. So you have to turn things around to get the, you know. But yes, certainly the music was totally sending me out there.
And so the show was in Paris? They came to town?
Yeah, they came to town. They played, there was this guy called Stéphane Bismuth, and I hope he's still around in Paris. And he invited bands to play, like pop bands, to play the New Morning, which was traditionally a jazz club. So I remember seeing like a double headline bill in quite a small jazz club, like it was My Bloody Valentine and Happy Mondays double headline in a jazz club in Paris. Isn't that crazy? Aren't you drooling? So, yeah, anyway, so we had also McCarthy came through. So, of course, I bought a ticket. And also the Wolfhounds. So you had the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, and you had the Wolfhounds and McCarthy.
Right.
And and there was lots of great bands coming through, which I was, always there at the front.
We'll listen to a track right now. This is McCarthy, Red Sleeping Beauty. What can you tell us about this track?
It's beautiful. And it's red.
So that was McCarthy, Red Sleeping Beauty. And what's interesting about this night we're talking about, it just so happens that you went, you saw the band perform, you enjoyed the performance, and then you met the band afterwards. And if you could tell us what happened next.
You're calling me a groupie?
I never said you're a groupie. A McCarthy enthusiast.
1, 2, can you hear me? Well, actually, there was a support band before that went on and on and on and on, and they were awful. And we were all like dying in there from this bad support act. And I remember seeing Tim, he was in the audience, and like kind of wandering around with a big spot on his nose. And I just went to speak to him. I said hello, and it was great because they had a day off the day after. And I said, well, I'll be your guide in Paris. And here's my phone number, because we didn't have mobiles in them days. And I remember I was like, is he going to ring me? Is he going to ring me? And I waited all day by the phone. And he did ring. And yes, and the rest is history.
You're obviously an excellent tour guide.
Exactement.
So next thing, you found yourself heading to London. And I don't know how long after that tour was, but you joined the band essentially.
Yeah, I joined the last 5 minutes of McCarthy, and they were when I moved to London, which was in September '89. They were recording, and Tim knew that I wanted to sing, and he's like, "Oh, sing on the record." So I did end up singing a few backing vocals on the record, and we did one last tour with McCarthy and the Chills from New Zealand, and then the group parted. I believe that Tim wanted to have more control over the music, and he felt it was the right time to start something new. And I think Malcolm, the singer, was quite happy also to be doing something else. But it was really that at that time where McCarthy were becoming a bit more popular, and because the Smiths were very popular, and somehow they could be kind of tied in with that. And really they weren't far from like their first American tour, but it didn't, they split before that.
Is it a fair assessment to make that with McCarthy, it was almost like the politics were the most important thing for them, secondary was the music? If you enjoyed the music, that was just the cherry on top, but they had a message.
Yes, yeah, and I think that's what Tim wanted to get away from, because Tim's priority was the music and not the politics. So there's probably a point of tension right there. Yeah. And Malcolm was very, very dedicated politicist, if there is such word. Well, he certainly wanted to change the world, and he felt that politics is the tool that humans have to do so, and it was very logical, very rational and logical, sometimes a bit too rational and logical, I think, compared to how wonky and warpy reality can be. You can't just cut everything with a knife, precisely.
But for you being around Malcolm, did that and the lyrics of McCarthy, did that play a large part in influencing a future Lætitia Sadier lyric writer?
Absolutely, because he sat me down and he said, don't ever talk about your heartaches in a song. And somehow it was like a threat, like, or I'll kill you. So I was like, all right, then, I better not. And indeed, for years, I just, and it's true. I never talk about my heartaches. Well, actually, I do now. But don't tell him, okay?
But for so many years, every time you'd go to write the lyrics for a new Stereolab album, would it be Malcolm appearing on your shoulder saying, "Remember what I told you"?
Exactly. And I really got his point. And I was, also politically motivated and quite an angry youth, really.
Can you paint us a picture? Because, around the very end of the 80s, 1990, when the Stereolab story is beginning, very interesting political climate in London. I believe Thatcher was still in power. What were you arriving to from Paris in London? You were already angsty and politically charged, and there were, I guess, a lot of things to be even more angsty about in London almost.
Yes, I believe the Tories were still in power. And it wasn't Margaret Thatcher. She'd gone out, but it was John Major, I think, or someone like that. And actually, John Major wasn't too bad when you compare him to Tony Blair. Tony Blair was a worse Tory than this poor John guy. So, but it's true that the Great Britain was quite depressed when I arrived, and that's when you had the wave of the shoegazers, which, by the way, wasn't a compliment. If you said to someone you're a shoegazer, it was not a nice thing. Now shoegaze is actually a trendy, cool thing that you should strive to be. It's like, so for me it's a bit weird, but so yeah, you had these guys looking at their shoes going with lots of pedals because they can't sing and they can't play and they can't, but so it was kind of, and some people say, well, it's Thatcher, she killed the nerve, the creative nerve and the edge, and now we just have this kind of amorphous bands, who play amorphous music with no spine. And sorry, I'm really exaggerating, but just to give you a flavor of what I arrived to. Still, there were bands like My Bloody Valentine, but they were, I think, they had their really exciting moment, and they were moving towards maybe having the pressure to create something extraordinary, and it wasn't happening. But really what I arrived to, what was born, and this was happening with Too Pure. I don't know if you remember this label. I was kind of notorious at some point because they had PJ Harvey, they had Mouse on Mars, they had Stereolab, they had Pram. So they had, some quite hot stuff, at once. But I remember, we went out to gigs practically every day in London, which was for me such bliss. And there was so the grunge was going on, and you had bands like the Faith Healers, which I don't know if it rings a bell with anyone here, but they were quite loose, and they rocked, and you had this girl with long hair who would go like this. And then people in the audience will go shh, 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 like this, and it was extremely fun, and it was about, come on, let's do something fun, let's have fun, and let's just loosen up, and and not be so serious all the time about everything. And they didn't really have any political message as such, but I think the political aspect of what they did was pretty strong, because it was kicking everyone up the butt and saying, loosen up, do something, get out there, do your stuff, don't be stuck up, so.
And in terms of you and Tim getting out there and doing your stuff, what was that moment where you both sat down and went, hey, let's start a band?
Well, it kind of happened very organically, whereby McCarthy kind of shut down, and Tim was writing songs straight away and getting, with he would bring them to me in a wheelbarrow. His 50 songs. Write lyrics, please. And sing them. So, it just, started, it just trickled through. And it was quite good because he had experience. Basically, they were signed to different, I don't know if they are actually signed anything, but they were on September Records and maybe something else, and then Midnight Records. And Midnight Records was very alienating, and whereby you couldn't do this, you couldn't do that. And so Tim really wanted freedom of action. So he was like, okay, we're going to start our own label. Like that, we won't have to give any accounts to anybody. And so we did start our own label, and we kind of self-financed our first record, which I brought here, a copy.
Should we listen to a track of that?
Yeah, I think we should, yeah. And this was completely self-made.
So it was very, very DIY, this whole kind of DIY thing.
Exactly. And that was the point of an indie band, is that you did it yourself. You didn't go to the boss. You didn't go to, to the man. In fact, you said, fuck you to the man.
Your friend David everyone's friend David would do the artwork. Someone would punch the labels. Like everyone in the crew had their role, right?
Yes, exactly. And yeah, these are freezer bags, by the way.
What do you mean by freezer bags?
But they're the ones where you can put your meat in and then you put it in the freezer. It was the perfect size. And I remember Tim and I going around London to record shops with a shopping trolley. Not the shopping trolley like that, but the one where you do your market with. And we go and sell our records to the record shops. And they all took them, and there were no returns. And this is actually quite an expensive item now.
So how many of these were pressed up originally?
Does it not say? It's DS is Geophonic Super 4501. I don't know, I'd say maybe 1,000, but right. I'm not sure. So let's have a little listen.
So that was essentially the first ever Stereolab release, The Light That Will, from this incredible DIY little project that you guys started up.
What is it? The green light. So yeah, it's the light that will cease to fail. And I think indeed that was taken from a Surrealist book, right. Probably from Breton or someone like that.
Can we get another mic, please? Okay, so I'm going to stop you right there. So this is something that went on to play a large part in influencing a lot of future Stereolab tracks, was the Surrealist movement and also the Situationist movement. Do you wanna talk a bit about this? How you stumbled across these influences in the first place, and what was it about them that inspired you to put pen to paper?
I think Tim turned me onto the Situationist movement. I think he quite liked the aspect of things that are a bit nebulous or not, and it's true, reality is hard to seize and to put in a box, and I think he didn't like that, and probably what was attracting him to a movement such as the Situationists, who some might argue never really existed anyway. It was just like, an appellation, but and am
I allowed to ask for those in this room that might be like, huh? Haven't stumbled across that just yet. In a very short kind of version, could you explain what the Situationist movement was?
Well, I don't know if it was actually like such a movement to speak of, but it was built around a guy called Guy Debord, who was a very very insightful guy into society. He was also very very bitter, I think. But who would not be when you look at society and how it's run, and how it's governed, and the forces that that govern our lives, like capitalist forces, and and even the architecture, and so he was very sensitive to all that, and wrote a classic book that's very hard to read called La Société du Spectacle, which
year did this come out in?
You and your years.
Sorry.
I don't know.
We talked about this before.
In the 60s, La Société du Spectacle, do you know the 60s? Anyone? I mean, it's, if you read one page already, it's like, wow, such an incision into all this bullshit, that, and, it's quite scary, actually, how we manipulate history, and how buildings shape us, and how we think, and and not to mention the media, and of course he was very perceptive and very good at pulling apart all the forces that that influence us, and of course that's very rich, and I was really interested in that, and because I am an idealist, and I think we can improve our the way we live, and we could achieve a better, fairer society.
At that point in time when Stereolab was starting out, was that a conscious decision on your behalf to use the platform that you'd been given to write about these sorts of things, about politics, about things that were going on in society?
Yes, of course. To me, there was no question about it, that this was. I think art is a real tool, a real political tool, in the sense that it's your way of acting and way of bringing in ideas. And in the late 70s and in the 80s, there were a lot of political groups. It was no big strange thing, a lot of Gang of Four, or but even in France, who have Orchestre Rouge or Marc Seberg, or who were very political, or even the fact of being in a band and deciding how you're going to lead your life and being the master of your life is a political act. And really, I came from that school of things, whereby, I'm in charge of my life here, and and making my music and writing my lyrics, brings meaning to my life, and that felt absolutely fundamental to what we were doing, and we were doing it as a matter of life or death, almost, So, and I think. And I think some people poo-pooed that, they just didn't get it. To them, making music was, entertainment, ha ha ha, for Saturday night. And it's like, no, it's not a Saturday night thing. This is our life, And it was very serious, and at the same time, not very serious, because we're just a very small pop band, We didn't take ourselves extremely serious,
I mean, I want to talk a bit about, we started off by playing something. This is the first release on the label Duophonic. But Duophonic was not just a record label that was for your own material. You were releasing music by other artists. And I think what's very, very interesting is I think about here's me going with the dates again. But I think around about 1992, you released a compilation called Shimmies and Super 8. And I think what a lot of people don't realize when we're talking about the history of Daft Punk is that Daft Punk, the story actually began with you. Tell us about a band called Darling and these young whippersnappers, these young excitable kids, Guy and Thomas.
Guy Manuel and Thomas Bangalter. Yeah, well, they were friends of ours. We a common friend had given us a tape by these two kids. They were very young. They were 17, 18 maybe. And they were called Darling with an apostrophe. And and we thought, that's a nice track, it's fun pop track. And we decided to do a little compilation. So we had Huggy Bear, who were very happening at the time. There were this Riot Girl band. I don't know if you've heard of Riot Girl movement. Have you? You haven't? You need to check your history. Okay, the Riot Girl were like basically a bunch of feminist women who were like, okay, at gigs we want the girls at the front. And they even had like women-only bands, women-only gigs and everything like that. I mean, it might have seemed a little bit silly, but unfortunately there was a need for that because there's still a lot of boys making music and coming to gigs and not a lot of girls. So it was a nice little kick up the butt of, And I remember the boys getting very defensive. What's these girls? What do they want? Well, they're the Riot Girls and they don't shave their legs. And no, but they were quite intellectual as well. And, and they made good points and they had the energy to go, like this. And we needed that. So they were good. Anyway, so you had Huggy Bear, who were very exciting band with excited people in it and singing rah, 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 like this. And we had Colm, who was a band from Paris, and we had Darlin and us. Voilà, so it was four-sided 2 7-inch. One, I have to show you this. The body of Christ. It's pretty, no? This is also quite a rare object.
Now worth a lot of money for Daft Punk completists, I believe.
Yes, possibly. So that's played on 45, and
should play Cindy So Loud.
Yeah, I'm just gonna put that on here. Let's see how it goes. Cindy so loud, Cindy so loud.
Very rare Daft Punk as Darlin. Guy on vocals, Guy-Man on vocals on the first track, and I believe Laurent, the mysterious third member of Darlin, went on to become part of Phoenix, right? And as Daft Punk folklore goes, it was the Melody Maker review of that EP where I think the reviewer was kind of trashing them and he called it Daft Punky thrash. And then basically a year later they came back as Daft Punk, and yeah. Weird to think that was all in the space of a year or 2 years, right?
Yeah, it was quite a quick turnaround.
Did you stay in touch with them as they kind of headed more and more into Daft Punk land?
I spoke to Thomas a few times, but yeah, I mean, we don't hang out these days. But who knows?
But hey, you played a part in that little that piece of French music history.
Yeah, somehow, yeah.
I think we'll go to a video right now. Let's get back to talking about Stereolab. Now, this is we're going to watch a video for French disco. And this is from a UK TV show. We'll watch it first, and then maybe you'll be able to tell us what the TV show was. So this is Stereolab. Again, sorry, me with my dates. I believe 1993. This is French disco.
I saw a couple of weeks ago at the Whiskey A Go Go Club in Los Angeles. This is Stereolab French disco.
Can you remember where it was? What the show was?
Yes, it was as you recognize it, it's the word. It was on Saturday night. You had this guy. Do you remember his name? No. Terry something. No.
No, but I remember it was always on very late. It was like 12 midnight.
Oh, that late? Yeah. I don't remember it being on so late. But yeah, so it was a Saturday. It was quite a silly show actually, where they had like competitions of who would eat the most maggots or something. Yeah, that kind of stuff.
And then performances by Stereolab.
Yes, actually, the presenter, whose name I forget, he saw us at the Whiskey a Go-Go, as he said, in his Mancunian accent, and when we played in LA. And he was supposed to go and see some other band, and he was not on the guest list, so he ended up getting a ticket to see us, who were playing down the road, and he loved us, and he invited us to play on his show, and I think that's one of the only 2 times we ever appeared on British television, yeah, live.
But it must be noted that the British music media definitely embraced Stereolab. And a lot of the magazines wrote very fondly. A lot of the music journalists that like to show off their deep knowledge themselves of all these like music genres like krautrock and bossa nova could flex. I get those references, blah blah blah. So there's a lot of British press that were loving to write about you guys, as opposed to the French media, which they really didn't treat Stereolab that good at all, right? Why? What was the relationship between Stereolab and the French music press?
Well, I would describe it as disastrous, really. There was one magazine in particular called Les Inrecuptibles, not to mention them, who just systematically shat in our backs for 17 years. Wow. And they just and they would really lay it on thick,
For what reasons?
I don't know. I mean, my explanation is that probably some misogyny. I couldn't help but take it a bit personal, unfortunately for me. But I think also there was like Les Inrock, there used to be a very good magazine in the 80s where it was one question, a good question, and an answer, answer, question, answer. And it was they would rewrite the speaking of whoever they were interviewing, and they had a really good plume. They were very good writers. I give them that. And it was a very popular magazine because you could actually learn something about and have real insights about music and why people made the music that they made. It was very exciting. And over the years it kind of went downhill, and it wasn't this question answer format. It was more like an article where the journalists would speak about themselves most of all, and they were somehow the star, and you were just like this, half a line somewhere, like dropped here and there, and that was a new type of journalism taking over, and not just in Les Inrock. I think it was kind of a general thing, and yes, and these guys were also aging, and aren't we all? And it is difficult, but I think that when Stereolab started, they really liked us actually, and but what they really wanted to do was talk about McCarthy, talk about the past, because the past was somehow better than the present and the potential future. And that annoyed me, I remember, it's like, well, and it annoyed Tim as well, because he wasn't there to speak about McCarthy. He wanted to talk about Stereolab. And I guess there was an element of, maybe they were starting to hype us a little bit, but we weren't ready to be hyped, because if you're hyped and all of a sudden you're a huge star and you're not ready, then that's when bands break up, or when your nervous system breaks up, and you can't, and you just freak. And I've seen it happen, I've seen it happen to people like PJ Harvey or the Cranberries or even Pulp, when they were from nobodies to all of a sudden being mega stars. And it's just not good, you don't want that, because it's going to give you a nervous breakdown, And I remember kind of going, well, like, and I don't know, maybe I said something wrong.
Did they see you as a French artist, or did they almost see, knowing a bit about your backstory and you'd spoke on a number of occasions about how you were somewhat disillusioned with the music scene back home. You went to London. Did they see you as somewhat of a traitor? Was this the case?
Probably.
Right.
A traitor. Well, yeah, I'm sorry. That's what I probably was or seemed to be, but yeah, I just didn't feel comfortable in France, and I still don't feel comfortable in France. I love visiting. I love France. I love my friends. I love Paris. But it's funny, each time I'm on the Eurostar and we cross the channel and we land like magically, we're in France. And I'm like, my first thought is, I really don't miss France. So, I mean, maybe I'm one of those people who was really born in the wrong country, like some people are born in the wrong body or something, So, but I mean, nothing wrong with that, like we all travel more and more, and we all end up in different places more and more. And it's, like you don't live in New Zealand anymore, right? So, I mean, these things are quite common, really. But, I mean, Stereolab and the press, we didn't have an easy story even in the UK, because the UK had their, but like most press, and I think that's because a lot of journalists are lazy. They just make boxes with stickers, and then they just throw you into a box. And if you happen to not quite fit any box, you're annoying,
But then what they do is they create a new box for you with a term that they've decided for you. And in the case of Stereolab, it was post-rock.
No, but that was tortoise. No, we were retro futurist pop.
I think in the CD selection somewhere in the world, you also, I think that was a subset of post-rock.
Really?
Yeah. I think
post-rock. Okay.
But retro futurist rock, right?
Pop.
Oh, okay, retro futurist pop.
Or pop rock in the instance of what we just seen.
We're going to play another video right now. This is something that you particularly wanted to play as well. It was taken off an album called Mars Zodiac Quintet, which, I think, I'm speaking for myself and other people in this room and lots of people watching this video. This was one of those incredible albums. It was the first album that I discovered of Stereolab, and it was one of these moments where for a lot of young people around the world, we really got opened up to a wonderful world of electronic music we didn't know existed before, and these instruments like Moogs and Farfisa, like it was like Alice in Wonderland falling down some kind of wormhole. So we're going to listen to a track of this right now. This is a track called Ping Pong. Before we watch the video, lyrically, what is this track about?
Ooh, sorry, it's quite heavy, but it's basically about the cycle of destruction within capitalist. The capitalist cycle of that's eating its own crap, and then engendering crisis and deeper, and a war. The war to repair everything, to get the economy back on track, produce, repair, rebuild, and then, another crisis. And except that now we're at a stage where it's not a crisis anymore. Can we call this a crisis? It's not a crisis, right? Because a crisis happens and then you either die or fall off the cliff, or you change and you evolve, right? And we're just stuck. I mean, since I was born, it's been la crise économique. So now we're just stuck. So I'm tending to think now that we are in a war. We are at war. And there are people who are out there to suck our wealth, our energy, our work, and make it as cheap as possible, to reap the benefits for their own profit. And we don't even know that they are waging war against us. So it's a strange kind of war, admittedly, but I think we're just in the war at the moment of this cycle.
So we'll watch this video now. This is definitely the subject matter what a 14-year-old is not thinking about, and then going back rediscovers all this. Yeah, no, definitely. This is Stereolab with a track called Ping Pong. So one more time, what are the lyrics for the chorus there? Bigger wars, bigger slumps.
And a shallower recovery. And it's funny, now I see what's the suitcase. He's Mr. Capitalist who's stealing our money. Yeah. That's what he is. Sometimes it takes a while for the penny to drop.
So sometimes 21 years.
Eh oui, c'est la vie.
So talk us a bit about the process of how a Stereolab track would come together at this point. So, you talked about this notion of Tim is literally in the lab. He's going away. He brings this wheelbarrow full of tracks to you. And then you have lyrics. And then how do you go about writing for something like that? And how do you, I guess, on the surface, if that was an instrumental, you've got such a sweet, soundscape, a poppy soundscape, and you're like, right, I've got some subject matter for this one.
Well, yeah, as I said, music was not just mere entertainment to us, and I don't know if it's because I was born in May '68 or what, but yeah, I always felt quite well. This is why are things the way they are, because there's big discrepancies, that I don't know. To me, it feels that I don't know. It's just not right. Things are not right, and when I see something that's not right, I want to put it right, and somehow I could never accept that people are so accepting of the status quo, which is. It's serving them to a degree, but not in fact, not even that much, So, okay, I'm a bit older now, and well, I guess I have to accept that maybe the changes will come about in a slow fashion, But still, I felt where there I have a tool, and I mean, music changed my life. I went to see some bands. Like I walked in a particular person, and I would walk out a different person, and I did believe, and had experience on a very intimate level, the power of art at large. It's not just music; it can be a movie. I don't know if you're familiar with Mississippi Records. They had the guy who runs it has inherited. 300 hours of filming by this 70-year-old guy who in the late 70s and 80s bought a little camcorder, and he went to film an America that he felt was vanishing, and basically he went to film poor people of America, and how they lived and just how they played their music, and so it was mostly black people, but some white people also. And so anyway, Mississippi Records made a presentation of some of these hours, and edited together. And I know I saw this presentation of this America that was vanishing. Not that poverty is vanishing, but that kind of people and ways of living. And I walked out. My brain was wired differently. So I believe in the power of that, and to me, what's the point in going to see an exhibition that just does nothing to you, that makes you feel nothing, or makes you think nothing, or very little, or horrible thoughts, or disgusting thoughts. I want to see something that will kind of make me react. Has some grit, where I'm going to walk out a different but better person somehow, or more aware, so I felt it was important. It just felt very natural. In fact, it was not like, ooh, scratching my head, what shall I talk about? No, it's like, well, this system is just appalling. We're having to serve it when it should be serving us. and and the governments are serving the system when they should be serving us. So all this also election thing was, just seemed like an absurdity, that we all think, oh well, it's democracy. Well, actually, no, it's not democracy. It's everything but democracy, in fact. So, yeah, and there were notions such as autonomy, which seemed very important to me. That we have to strive at being autonomous. That means we give ourselves our own law, and and if everybody does that, then we're all empowered of our own law, and we're more, we are more inclined to relate to each other in better ways. Sorry, I'm not explaining very well, but like just as an idea rather than someone imposing the law on everybody.
I think you are. One thing that is, it must be asked. You were writing about these things 21 years ago, and even nearly 30 years ago, when kind of McCarthy around, you're writing about these issues, and now more than ever before, these things are so out in the open. Are you still as charged as you were 21 years ago to write about these things? Do you ever get to a point where you're like, oh, what's the point? It's just 21 years have gone on, I've been writing about these things and nothing happens, it's only getting worse.
No, I still want to write about these things, but I think maybe 20 years ago I was going head on, and I think it's difficult because we're faced with a human factor, and the humans are vulnerable, and they're corruptible, and they can be cowards, and all sorts of things like that. So it's like, well, accept that, respect that, and how to bring people around to surmount their cowardice or whatever it is that that's keeping us down there and keeping us from taking our power into our hands. Like how do we get, it's the state of thing is normal, whereby you have corporations who are going to want to suck the life out of the workers. That's a normal thing. But what's not normal, I think, is that people aren't going, hey, what the fuck? This is my wealth. This is my power. I want it back. So this is where I want to be, acting here, like as an artist, to like think around just that point here. Not go, the bad ones, the bad corporations. We all know they're terrible. And as you say, that's very out in the open. But what isn't is our relationship to that, and the way we react in the face of that, in the face of this open theft that is going on right under our eyes and noses.
We're going to play another track right now, which I don't think is that political. Sibel's Reverie.
Sibel's Reverie.
Okay,
Yeah.
my French is terrible.
Reverie. Reverie.
Reverie.
But you say that in English, a reverie.
Oh, yeah, reverie. No, I was about to say my French is terrible, so I don't know what the lyrics are about, because this track is actually in French.
And there's no such word as entrepreneur in French.
Right. What is this track about?
It's about childhood and about my swing in my childhood. But don't tell Malcolm from McCarthy, okay?
So, one more time, the name of that track was?
Sibel's Reverie.
Taken off an album called Emperor Tomato Ketchup. And I think, like, the one thing that I have to... I'm sure there'd be a lot of Stereolab fans that would hate me if I didn't ask. Quite possibly the most incredible and imaginative album titles in the history of music. From Stereolab. Personal favourite, Cobra Phases in there.
Cobra and Phases play Voltage in the Milky Night. Did I get it right?
You got it right. Who came up with the album titles?
Tim did.
Right.
My album titles are like The Trip.
Yeah. Which I think, okay, it's you know, you've with that response there, you've taken me kind of to a point that I wanted to talk about, which is, you know, undeniably for so many people around the world, you as the voice of Stereolab were what a lot of people's, you know, this was Stereolab to them. Obviously, the music side of things, which was Tim's contribution, was a very, very large element as well. They were both equal. Yet ultimately, you know, it's your voice on every track, but you're not able to ultimately have a say in how your voice ends up. Was that correct? Is that what was happening at the time?
Yeah, as I said, it was no democracy, Stereolab. So, and that's fair enough. But yeah, Tim took most of the artistic decisions in terms of writing, composition, arrangements, and and I had no say. And I did want to write songs. I had songs in me, certainly, and
because it must be noted, you could play. You were playing keys when you would perform live. You were playing which instruments?
Well, I played the Moog. I can't really play keyboards like that, you know. I could play notes and go. That was a lot of fun. But I wanted to write songs. In fact, I discovered I wanted to write songs because I would dream of songs, and I would go, oh, I wrote a song in my dream. It's like a wet dream, you know, and I felt I had to have my own outlet, and the only way to have my own outlet is to have my own band or my own sort of formation, solo project, as they call it, and indeed that's how I formed Monade, and it took me 3 years to realize that I was in a band called Stereolab with my boyfriend, and I went off solo, and I called myself Monade. You know, 3 years for that.
3 years, and then that penny dropped. But before we hear a track from Monade, I'd like to ask you if it's okay. I mean, just how difficult is that a situation to be in when, you know, I'm sure so many of the people in this room find themselves in you know, musically creative environments where they're collaborating with other people and they get a say in what's happening. You're in a situation where, it's, as you say, it's not a democracy, but it just so happens that person that you're collaborating with is also your boyfriend. How do you balance creative partner with life partner?
I found it very difficult. And, you know, it's another one of those things that sounds ideal, you know, but I think it was far from ideal. And in fact, now with my new, although we are kind of collaborating, as we will see later on with another video, I just don't want really to be in a collaborative project with my boyfriend, because I don't know, I was a bit traumatized by that somehow. I got over it, but it was difficult to be, I don't know, I felt like I was more like an object rather than, you know, an active participant in this, and it wasn't a nice feeling, really. So, but I mean, we were young and we're insecure and and you know, so, and things were the way they were, and it's fantastic. I really learned a lot, but it wasn't always fun to be in that situation where, you know, it's difficult to stand at the front of stage and to sing your lyrics. It's difficult to write lyrics, to write good lyrics. It's, you know, and I was kind of thrown into that role because that's what Tim didn't want to do. And so, yeah, and it's difficult to sing in front of people, you know. So I had to learn all that, you know, like this on the spot. And, you know, and I'm very thankful actually that I did. But it was difficult, and I felt like the kind of hardest, and Tim was hiding away with his guitar, you know, and it's like if you have a problem, if you have a cold, you can still play the guitar, but singing when you have a cold or you're jet lagged, and you just arrive and you have to play a show. It's going to show in the voice much more so than it will show in your keyboard or your guitar, and so you're more exposed as a singer. And I felt, that I was doing like the kind of awkward role, but still I embraced it and I loved it and I learned a lot. So I can't complain really.
All right, we're going to listen to something from Monade right now. So, all of a sudden, you developed a solo project. Just how liberating was it to have a project now where it was your lyrics, but you actually, determined and dictated what the music was as well?
It was extremely liberating and very fun, and I would say that the Monade projects did 3 albums were really like a playground, because I had to construct my own identity, but within a school that was Tim's School of Music, as I called it, and I had to find my own voice, who I was, what was, and I'm still looking for that, but I did have my playground, and just tried things, and whatever, and I didn't feel the consequences would be, if there were any, it wasn't really important. The important thing was to do it. So, which I did. And I haven't heard this I think even since it came out. But anyway, it's called Cash Cash. And it's one of my first tracks. Let's have a look. With regard to what was happening with Monade, it must be noted, Stereolab was still going on. But in terms of lyrically and the way you'd approach songwriting for the work you're doing with Monade, is there things that you felt that you could do with Monade that you couldn't do with Stereolab from a lyric perspective? No, from a lyrical perspective, I had complete freedom in Stereolab. So there's, it was indifferent. But it's true that at the beginning of doing Monade, it was like, I feel like my concern was more placed on the music, my attention, and the lyric was more accessory. And I remember around writing, I was pregnant with my son, so it's called Cash Cash because he was supposed to come out on a certain due date, and it took much longer to come out. Right. So it was like...
What does Cash Cash mean?
It means hide and seek. And it was a song, don't be scared of coming out. Even if the world, it might seem like a somber place, right. Do come out and play. But yes, it's very emotional to hear this because now I know why I don't play my records, because it makes me want to cry. Like Mary is all over this. Right. She's playing the keyboard and she's saying ooh, and I totally remember being pregnant like this, and Mary playing the keyboards and me engineering, and there was this idea of because Mary and I were both kind of feminists, not with the hat feminists, but in the sense that we're women and we want to do it. And there was a real conscious effort behind, the fact that we were doing it and we had to do it. And like as women, because we were, there was the Riot Girl movement, and, it was like, hey, girls, get up and do it, So, there's also all this behind it, like, yeah, we're women and we're doing it. And that was fun. And I can only encourage women, to do it, because it's right. That's when you're actually engaging in life, is when you're doing things. And so anyway, that also reminds me all of this. Right.
One thing I got to point out: the last 2 tracks that we heard, you were singing in French, and maybe there's absolutely no grand decision behind it at all. But for a lot of people in this room, a lot of them, English is a second language, and yet you jump between English sometimes and their native language sometimes. For you, how do you know if a track is going to be sung in French or English? Are there certain things you feel that you can express in French that you can't in English? Yeah, is there anything behind that?
I mean, in the beginning, I was happy to sing in English because it was one that much removed from me. So it was like more impersonal, and I enjoyed that somehow as part of a program to run away from myself, and then I realized, okay, well, this running away from myself is not serving me, so I should come back, and come back home, and and I guess that's when I embraced singing in French also, and then it became just this kind of very mechanical thing that as soon as I got too comfortable writing in one language, I would automatically revert to the other. And I don't know why I had to make it hard on myself like that, but, that was just my way.
Something that you mentioned before, which was, the tragic death of the co-vocalist Mary, which happened around about 2002, which was a pretty tumultuous time for the group. Mary was tragically killed in a car accident. Not only that, but I believe around that time, as you mentioned before, Tim was your boyfriend. You'd had a baby together, and that relationship ended as well. Yet you're still in the band, carrying on and putting on a brave face. Just how difficult is it to keep this thing that you've all created going on, where internally, it's things aren't the best?
It was very difficult. It was, a very difficult time of separation and loss, and for which music can be of a real help, in where you can pour your sadness, or when it came to losing Mary and we were writing Margarine Eclipse, and I ended up having to sing all her parts because she was gone, and it was really, really sad time. It took me a few years really to kind of assimilate and kind of recover, but I'm still extremely sad of losing Mary. And it took me, I don't know if I've actually completely accepted her death. Like, to me, she's still like in the room right next door,
I'm just being conscious of time, and very soon I'm going to throw it over to these guys for questions. But, it must be noted, 2007, your manager, Martin Pike, who is part of Duophonic as well, the label, posted a very, not so cryptic message online and said that, yes, Stereolab will be going on an indefinite hiatus. So yeah, and it comes with the inverted commas indefinite hiatus. But that was a point in your career where, you stepped out solo. Was it hard to make that decision that, okay, it's been 19 years, there's been ups and downs, but we've got this amazing body of work. Let's call it a day.
No, it wasn't hard. It was harder to be in Stereolab by this stage than for it to end. So, it was Tim's call anyway, and it felt like it was the right time to give it a rest at least. And it's still, to this day, I still don't know if we're ever going to reform or what, but as far as I'm concerned, I haven't stopped making music, and this playground has developed into something I like to think more formed, and though it's still taking on a shape, and as I guess all art, is, I don't think you ever arrive there. And if you do, maybe it's not such a good thing. So for me, the end of Stereolab was actually the end of something that had become quite painful. Yeah. The relationships in the band were not so fun, and I didn't like being the only woman in the band. That I found really tedious, in fact. And I'm just really, really happy now to be making my own music and in my own terms and refining that. And I have a great band. which are playing at La Gaîté tomorrow, opening for Nicolas Godin. And we're a trio, and it's great. I'm very happy with what I'm doing now, and I'm not like, oh, I hope Stereolab's gonna reform. If it does, great, because I'm not gonna lie to you and say I hate Stereolab. I love the music, and I will sing Tim songs any day of my life, I think. But like on a human level, I'm very happy to be where I'm at today.
And it must be noted for everyone in this room that you and Tim there's been a couple of occasions in the last couple of years where you've got up on one of his side projects and sung a song. There's still a great friendship that's still there. Well, there's a friendship that's still there.
Well, there's something there.
Let's watch it. We'll watch a video right now. This is video number 4 to the technical guys. So it must be noted as well. You're now recording and touring.
I hope it's Dry Fruit we're gonna see.
Yeah, it's Dry Fruit we're gonna see.
Because I've had enough of Stereolab now.
Yeah, we're at video number 4, which is Dry Fruit territory. So yes, you're now recording and touring under your own name.
Yes, indeed. And yeah, we just finished an American tour with my trio. And it was nice because people came, like we had crowds every night in every town, and people came to see me and not Stereolab. So it's nice that, of course they probably love Stereolab as well. And some of them actually would come and apologize, say, I'm sorry, I don't know Stereolab. I'm like, oh, great, how refreshing. So, yeah, I mean, not that there's a competition, but it's true. It's a double-edged sword, coming out of something that has such a reputation and, a body of work, as you say, and establishing myself as my own work, my own thing.
How difficult, because, again, that's something that applies to a lot of people in this room. Stepping out solo and there's been times in the last few years where it's literally just been you, right? It's without a backing band, and it's you packing up the guitar and getting on the plane and touring the world. I mean, yeah, how difficult was that?
It's been so formative and so fantastic already, from the point of view of just being with myself and traveling with myself and getting to know myself has been fantastic. And I think very important, to manage that, and also to be forced. When you're in a band, you're going to hang out with your mates, and there be absolutely forced to be open to the world and whoever is coming to me, and go towards people also. And it's been, I'm so lucky. It's been so beautiful, and also people who come to the shows or invite me. Such music lovers, and I mean, practically all these people are my friends today, so it's like meeting peers, so it's been really, really excellent.
So we're going to watch a video. This is Dry Fruit. I think one of the final questions from me, Lætitia, before we hand things over is what keeps you constantly motivated to get up? I don't know if it's every day but every few days and constantly in the garden of information out there, constantly find little corners to tend to and get new things and turn those sources of inspiration into lyrics for songs.
Well, there is so much out there, really, and I feel life is too short even to begin scratching the surface. Hopefully life's not over, but there's a lot to tend to.
Before we say goodbye, questions from the audience.
Hi. I had a question about what you said before about being active and being aware of, the time where you live and stuff. And you're a singer, so you can, say stuff like directly to people who listen to you. And I feel you about I have to say something, and I'm a producer, so I don't sing. And my question is, it's not really a question, but I need some ideas, and I really not want to know how you feel about expression, but without words.
That's okay. That's I don't know what to say exactly, but I mean, I think there's many forms of languages, many forms of language out there. Architecture is a language, and music is a language, mathematics is a language, and I'm sure in production you probably have things to say, lots of things to say, in fact, on how you're going to produce a track, what effects or no effects, or I would imagine it's pretty rich, actually, a form of expression that is not heard directly, like, oh, and now I'm singing a song with words in it, and these words have a meaning. It's probably more subdued, but I think, on some subtle level, it's pretty powerful how things are produced. And some people, well, usually other producers, listen out for that language and totally know how to detect it and to interpret it and explain it. To most people, it's true, it's subliminal, and you won't articulate it ever, but who's not to say that you receive it and it in an impactful way. So
Okay, thank you.
Hi, thanks for being here. And before you mentioned the board, la Société du Spectacle, and as a French artist and as a left-oriented musician, I think you are lefty, not the right, I think. I was thinking about if you are inspired maybe from the work of Gilles Deleuze, because a lot of musicians were inspired by the work of Gilles Deleuze. I mean, for example, and today actually is the anniversary of his death. It was 20 years ago. And I was thinking about if he inspired your work somehow.
yeah, actually, indeed, there's a song that's inspired pretty directly by Gilles Deleuze. It's called Becoming. So I think he was pretty up on the idea of devenir, the possibility of devenir, and the non-tragic possibility of devenir. And that really inspired me, because as a French person, I felt in this country, and this is me as a sort of adolescent or growing up person in France. I never went to music school, and my parents didn't encourage me to become a musician. It was in total opposition with my class, my parents, society, and somehow, if you are an academic and if you'd gone to school, or if God had touched you and said you are an artist, you are a musician, then you are okay. And I was none of that, but I wanted to become that. And I think that in France you were not allowed to become anything unless you were already born in it, and somehow you were sanctified at some point by someone who said, okay, and the press or something, and and I felt, fuck that, I'm out of here. First opportunity, I went to London, where it was okay to become something, that it was okay to just get your amps, get a rehearsal room somewhere cheap as possible, and and write your songs and do it, so it was more action. Where you were, going to become and become and become. And I think, we're all becoming, and we should remind ourselves that of this dimension, So yeah, that's thanks to Deleuze. But sorry to close on this. I'm more of a Castoriadis girl myself.
First of all, thank you for all the great music. You've been a huge inspiration in a lot of ways. You talked a lot about your left-wing politics and Deleuze. We talked about Deleuze now, but also Du Bois, the situationism. Speaking of that, how do you feel about the fact that all of this is facilitated and paid for by a huge corporation that makes soft drinks with caffeine in it? What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, well, it's interesting. I hope I'm not gonna get slashed, but I mean, you'll never see me drink that. I think it tastes like bad medicine, but that's my taste. Well, I mean, if it wasn't sponsored by a big corporation, I guess then maybe the state would be sponsoring that. Would that be okay? I don't know. I don't know if that would. I mean, I'm aware of that, and it's true. Money talks. Like I'm being paid to sit here and speak, and you are probably too, and it's true. All this is facilitated by the money of corporation. I mean, I can't celebrate it, but at the moment, I mean, I can't either spit in the soup, as we say, and say it's bad. I don't know. It's just how it is. I don't know. What do you think?
I'm pretty much on board with you because, I mean, obviously everybody's here. Everybody's having a good time, creating music, getting together and meeting awesome people, having awesome conversations, hopefully opening some minds here. So all of that is positive, but obviously there's an exchange here. And, and there's also, I guess, it's kind of controversial to say this because this is paid by the corporation. So, this is kind of a disruption, I guess.
Not at all. Not at all. I think we're at the heart of something. You're touching upon something that's very real. This is the reality. But I think that, I mean, at the moment that's how it is. But I think we can still work at, maybe giving corporations less power to overtake the world. Now it's just chains everywhere, overtaking. Like in my area where I live, it's like chains are arriving like on a big scale, and I don't want chains. I want Mr. Smith, to his butcher, and Mr. Mrs. whatever, rather than these chains. I just can't stand it. I mean, the chains is just one aspect of it that hits us on a daily basis. But no, I totally disagree with that. And yes, money can buy also culture and these kind of events. And, well, that's at least one good side of it. So I'm not going to diss it. But still, I don't like how corporations are given all this power to exploit workers, and give them less and less rights. And less pay, and etc., etc. And I think that should be, tackled somehow, politically, and maybe on the streets, at some point, and en masse, millions of people. But it's a very, very large subject, but, you're right. Any other questions?
That's a tough one to follow. Stereolab was a really important band for me because I think they had such a rich DNA. Alongside, say, Broadcast or even Fairport Convention, there was so much more than just one band that came with the territory. I'm wondering, was Stereolab a laboratory experiment for Tim, or was there ever a situation where you guys went into a room and jammed?
We never jammed.
that's what I expected. And the second question was just...
It was forbidden to jam.
It's interesting. And then to bring it to the present day, how do you find being a woman in the industry now in comparison to late 90s?
Well, I find there's more women in the industry, more women who are in bands. Yesterday I went to see a band called Deerhunter play. In fact, they were our support act in America, and they were playing in London, so I went to see them.
She was a participant here last year. So
okay.
She was sitting on that side just last year.
Right,
in Tokyo.
Okay. Angel.
Deerhunter.
Fantastic, okay. So, yeah, absolutely brilliant, very brilliant music, her and her sister. And they had a support band, and there was 2 women on guitars and 2 men, drums and bass. So, you know, I'm finding there's quite a lot more women who are doing it and doing it well. And I discovered this band called the Savages, and you know, a super rock band. So yeah, I mean, you know, I find there's probably more women. Yeah, still it's not equal, but I don't know, should it be? You know, but that's also a very big topic.
Are there any more questions? Well, I tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, well, we look forward to the show tomorrow night. Super excited about that. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Lætitia Sadier.